Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In a large, elegant-looking house nestled in an affluent suburb of Chicago, the air seemed thick with an invisible but heavy tension. Sarah Johnson, a young black woman recently married to Mark Davis, stood in the front hall, her heart sinking. Tonight, she would meet Evelyn Davis, her husband's mother, for the first time, a woman with cold eyes, a sharp voice, and strong ideas about what a real family should be. Behind that door, much more than a simple family dinner was taking place. It was a silent battle, a confrontation between past and present, between ancestral prejudices and modern hopes. Sarah knew she was about to face more than the discomfort of a difficult mother-in-law. She was about to face racism head-on. What she didn't yet know was that this evening would descend into the most cruel humiliation, a humiliation whose repercussions would reach far beyond the walls of this house, shaking their entire universe and leaving the world, for a moment, speechless. Sarah Johnson had always dreamed of a peaceful and happy life. At 28, she had just completed her master's degree in communications and was working as a coordinator for an NGO in Chicago. She was a sweet, determined woman with a natural elegance and a smile that brightened up dark days. When she met Mark Davis, a 32-year-old software engineer, their love was immediate. Mark was caring, respectful, and genuinely affectionate toward Sarah. Their wedding was an intimate celebration, full of promise and hope. But hope quickly clashed with reality. Evelyn Davis, Mark's mother, was a large woman in her 60s from a conservative family with rigid ideas and deep-rooted racial prejudices. From their first meeting, Evelyn cast a judgmental eye on Sarah. That day, Sarah arrived at the Davises' house for Sunday lunch. She had carefully chosen a simple but elegant dress and baked a chocolate cake, hoping to make a good impression. As soon as she crossed the threshold, Evelyn greeted her with a fixed, almost polite smile, but her eyes betrayed a slippery coldness. "So, Sarah, how's work going?" Evelyn asked dryly. Sarah answered calmly, trying to hide her discomfort. "Very good, thank you. It's a job I really like." Mark, sitting a little further away, was giving his mother warning glances, aware that this was not just a cordial exchange. The conversations continued, but the atmosphere remained heavy. Evelyn made subtle, almost imperceptible remarks about Sarah's cultural habits, her lifestyle, her way of speaking, anything that might distinguish her. Sarah felt every word like a blow, but she tried to stay calm, telling herself that it was only a matter of time before things got better. But this lunch was only the first act of a long fight. The days following that first lunch were filled with unspoken words and small, invisible wounds. Sarah often returned home with the weight of an emotional exhaustion that she struggled to explain to Mark. She knew it wasn't just a demanding mother-in-law, but something deeper, a hidden hostility that Evelyn hid behind forced smiles and double-edged compliments. When they invited Evelyn over for dinner, Sarah tried to be perfect. The meal carefully prepared, the house spotless, the conversation measured. But Evelyn never missed an opportunity to slip in a snide remark. One evening, as Sarah was presenting a soul food dish, Evelyn narrowed her eyes and whispered loud enough for Mark to hear. "It's not really what we eat at home, but hey." Mark frowned, ready to defend his wife, but Sarah placed a gentle hand on his arm, signaling him not to escalate the situation. Sarah understood that Mark was also experiencing an inner conflict. He loved his mother, as well as Sarah, but he didn't want to find himself in the middle of a battle he dreaded. At work, Sarah shared her doubts with her best friend, Lisa, who fervently supported her. "Never let anyone erase you, Sarah. Your dignity is stronger than their prejudices." Yet, with each new encounter, Evelyn seemed to find new excuses to put Sarah down, whether it was her choice of clothing, her way of speaking, or even her friends. One day, while Sarah was wearing a brightly colored dress for a family brunch, Evelyn blurted out, in front of everyone, "This kind of outfit is a little too flashy for a respectable young woman, don't you think?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Sarah, who felt her face burn with a mixture of shame and anger. Mark looked down, unable to meet his wife's gaze. Sarah knew at that moment that she had to find the strength to stop these humiliations. But how? That evening, Mark insisted that Sarah accompany Evelyn to dinner at his parents' house. a tradition he wanted to maintain despite the growing tensions. Sarah agreed, secretly hoping the evening would go better than previous encounters. The Davis home was sumptuous, tastefully decorated but imbued with an almost clinical coldness. Evelyn, as usual, greeted Sarah with a smile that never reached her eyes. The meal began with polite conversation, but Evelyn quickly took control of the evening. In a honeyed but icy voice, she said, "Sarah, you know, in our family, we have certain traditions, values to respect. I hope you adapt to them." Sarah felt a shiver run through her, realizing it wasn't a compliment but a warning. Evelyn's remarks became increasingly cruel, mixing covert racism with condescension. She criticized Sarah's speech, her hairstyle, her taste in music, everything that made her who she was. At one point, Evelyn stood up abruptly and said, in front of everyone, "I don't understand how my son could be attracted to someone so different." A heavy silence filled the room. Sarah felt her eyes water, but instead of running away, she slowly straightened, her gaze determined. "Evelyn, I am different, yes. But that difference in no way diminishes the value I bring to your family, nor the love Mark and I share." Mark, caught between his mother and his wife, stood up in turn, his voice trembling. "Mom, stop. That's not how you treat Sarah. She's my wife." But Evelyn, frozen in her prejudices, replied harshly, "You should think about what you say, Mark. Sometimes you have to think about reputation." The evening ended in a chilling atmosphere. Sarah left the house with the painful feeling of having been exposed, humiliated in front of those she would have liked to consider her family. Mark remained silent for a long time, torn between his love for Sarah and loyalty to his mother. This nightmarish dinner was a turning point. It revealed deep wounds, but also Sarah's inner strength, who, despite the pain, had no intention of giving up. The days following that dinner were the hardest Sarah had ever experienced. Every morning she woke with a heaviness in her heart, a dull ache that crept into every thought. She loved Mark with all her being, but the gap that had grown between her and her stepmother seemed unbridgeable. What Evelyn had said, the way she had publicly humiliated her, still echoed in her mind, slowly chipping away at her self-confidence. At work, Sarah put on a brave face, masking an inner turmoil behind her professionalism. Her colleagues saw a strong woman, but no one suspected the emotional storm brewing within her. The nights were the cruelest. She replayed Evelyn's words, her gestures, her looks over and over again. She sometimes wondered if she wasn't responsible, if she could have done better, said something else, been different. Yet, deep inside her, a flame would not go out. An inner voice reminded her that she deserved respect, true love, and dignity. Sarah decided to listen to this voice. She began writing in a notebook, an outlet for her thoughts, emotions, and dreams. She found refuge in music, rediscovering the piano she had long since abandoned. One afternoon, Lisa, her best friend, came to see her. She listened to her attentively, then said in a soft but firm voice, "Sarah, you can't change Evelyn, but you can decide how you let her affect you. You are much stronger than you think. Don't let her hatred suffocate you." These words resonated deeply within Sarah. She understood that she had to fight, not only for her relationship, but for herself. Mark, for his part, seemed distraught. He wanted to protect Sarah, but he feared losing his mother. Their relationship was strained, filled with heavy silences and shifty glances. Mark's dilemma confronted Sarah with a cruel reality. Sometimes, love wasn't enough to overcome the hurts of the past. But Sarah was up for the challenge. She wasn't going to let intolerance define her. She was going to find her voice and make it heard, no matter the cost. A few weeks after that painful dinner, Sarah felt she could no longer remain silent. Evelyn's repeated humiliations had deeply hurt her, but they had also awakened in her a new strength, a determination to defend her dignity and her love. One Sunday afternoon, while Mark was away working on an urgent project, Sarah received a call from Evelyn, demanding to see her, her voice sharp and authoritarian. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then agreed. She knew this meeting would be difficult, perhaps even explosive, but she had decided not to run away anymore. When she arrived at the DeVise's house, Evelyn greeted her with her usual cold smile. Without preamble, she said, "Sarah, I still don't understand how you could convince my son to marry you." This sentence made Sarah's whole body vibrate. But instead of closing up, she answered in a clear voice. Evelyn, I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to tell you that I deserve respect. Not just from you, but from this whole family. Evelyn narrowed her eyes, surprised by Sarah's confidence. You talk about respect, but you have to understand that our differences are great. It will be difficult. Sarah stepped forward, her gaze straight. Our differences exist, yes, but they do not justify hatred or humiliation. I love your son, and I am his wife. I am not an obstacle, but a part of his life. And I refuse to be treated like an outsider in my own family. Silence fell, heavy and palpable. Gradually, the tension gave way to a more honest exchange. Evelyn, though her pride was wounded, began to glimpse Sarah's strength, her immutable dignity. When Mark came home that evening, he found Sarah and her mother sitting in the living room, exchanging measured but sincere words for the first time in months. Mark felt a weight lift from his heart. Perhaps, despite everything, there was a path to reconciliation. But the road would be long, strewn with pitfalls, and everyone would have to make choices with serious consequences. A few weeks after the confrontation between Sarah and Evelyn, an unexpected event came to upset the fragile balance of the Davis family. Mark was invited to a charity gala organized by the company he worked for. This highly publicized event brought together influential figures, executives, and members of local high society. Sarah, although nervous, decided to accompany him to show Evelyn that she was now an integral part of his life and that she had a place in this world. During the evening, as guests shared speeches about diversity and inclusion, a reporter asked Mark a direct question about his personal life, about how he reconciled his conservative family background with his marriage to Sarah, a black woman. Mark, at first disconcerted, spoke sincerely. My marriage to Sarah is the most beautiful thing that has ever happened to me. It taught me to push myself beyond my limits, to question my prejudices, and above all to love unconditionally. This statement was greeted with applause, but what followed was even more striking. Sarah, moved, was invited to speak in turn. She recounted her journey, her struggles with discrimination, and how love had been a powerful driving force in overcoming obstacles. To everyone's surprise, Evelyn Davis, who was present in the room, stood up. Silence fell. In a trembling but clear voice, she spoke. I have to admit that I was hard on Sarah, that I let my prejudices guide my actions. It's not easy for me to admit my mistakes, but I want to learn, to change, for the good of my family. This confession shocked the audience, and especially Sarah, who felt for the first time a sincere openness. The gala was widely covered by local media, which highlighted this family in the midst of transformation, a symbol of a broader fight against racism and intolerance. That evening, a new page was written, not only for the Davises, but also for all those who believed in the power of change and reconciliation. The weeks following the gala were marked by a breath of fresh air in the Davis household. Evelyn, aware of her mistakes, made sincere efforts to understand Sarah and overcome her prejudices. She began to take an interest in Sarah's culture, her hobbies, and even her work. The conversations, previously frosty and tense, gradually became warmer, filled with honest curiosity. Mark, relieved, saw his relationship strengthen, not because everything was perfect, but because each was now willing to compromise and open up to the other. Sarah, for her part, had gained confidence. She had transformed her suffering into strength and her determination into action. She participated in several local initiatives aimed at raising awareness against racism and promoting intercultural dialogue. However, the road to reconciliation was not without its obstacles. Some members of the extended family, who held to the old values, expressed their discontent, reminding Sarah and Mark that the fight against intolerance was a long and complex process. Still, the Davis family's example inspired those around them, and even the local community, to reflect on their own prejudices and consider change. What began as a story of humiliation and pain gradually became a story of hope, resilience, and transformation. Years later, the Davis home still echoed with laughter and lively discussion, but in a completely different tone than before. Sarah and Mark had been through a lot, but their love, forged through struggle and understanding, had become a strong pillar. Evelyn, transformed by her own journey, had become a valuable ally, committed to the fight against racism. sharing her experience to encourage others to overcome their prejudices. Sarah founded an organization dedicated to supporting families facing tensions related to cultural and racial differences. Her story, shared in lectures and workshops, inspired many people to rise above adversity. The once torn Davis family had become a symbol of hope, proving that change was possible, even in the face of the oldest wounds. What this story teaches us is that dignity, speech, and love can triumph over the invisible walls of intolerance, and that sometimes the deepest wounds are the fertile ground for authentic reconciliation, capable of silencing the world to better make it reborn.